There are a couple of points I'd like to make, Mr Chair, but I think it's really important that while Labor is supporting this bill, that at these committee stages as well, we register on the record one of our disappointments about the bill, albeit that we are happy that numbers of other amendments that we sought in the course of the Select Committee deliberation on this bill were adopted. And this is the fact that the bill dropped Labor's proposed amendment to make it explicit for principals to ensure that schools provided guidance and counselling on career choices and career pathways. And I just want to take a moment of the House's time, Mr Chairman, to talk about this matter as it relates to this bill. Because right now we're hearing a lot about tertiary education opportunities, about completion rates at tertiary institutions, of failure rates, and we're hearing a lot about the need to peg some funding of tertiary institutions, some part of tertiary institutions' funding to the success rates and the completion rates of their students. And one of the things that happens repeatedly when one discusses this with CEOs of polytechs or vice-chancellors of universities, and to some extent CEOs of private training establishments as well, is the lament that goes out about the degree to which students exiting secondary schools are prepared to make appropriate career choices and appropriate further education choices. And so one of the things that has taken on a new dimension of concern for us in the Labor Party, and which is why we lament the dropping of our proposed amendment that guidance counselling or career counselling be obligatory, be mandatory in schools, is that there is now some sort of disjunction between where this bill is going and the things that it could say but is not going to say, and the kinds of requirements that are emerging at the end of the compulsory sector of education and the movement into post-compulsory or tertiary education opportunities. So frequently Vice-Chancellors will say students have made inappropriate choices. And how are they to avoid making inappropriate choices if they are not supported by career counselling and career guidance at the end of their compulsory schooling? So at the end of secondary schooling, if they think that they really want to, let's take Mr Joyce's example, and they want to go into veterinary science, and they're accepted into veterinary science, and clearly at the end of year one they don't make it through to year two, then there has been an inappropriate career choice or study choice made. And that lends weight, in fact new weight, given the kinds of policy directions that the government is proceeding in under the tertiary education portfolio. The dots are not being joined with this piece of legislation. And so if it were possible for this, even through an SOP in the Minister's name, to be reinstated as a part of this legislation, then I would urge the Minister to do that. It is a matter of joining the dots. Here is a piece of legislation which could have something in it that equipped students to make sensible and appropriate choices, not simply to go into medicine because their mother was a doctor or their father was a scientist, but to in fact choose a course where they can stay the distance, where they can succeed and they cannot be one of these figures that the government is keen on avoiding, and that is those who do not complete courses or those who fail more than half of their papers. And so, Mr Chairman, that is something that we continue to lament, Mr Chairman.
The Honourable Mary Ann Street.
We continue to lament on this side of the House. It should have been something that could have provided a more seamless framework for education between the compulsory and the post-compulsory sector. However, that is now on the record as one of our objections, albeit that we have decided to support this bill because of some of the further changes that have been made in the course of the Select Committee's deliberation. The second area I want to talk about, Mr Chairman, is that relating to the new clause 128, new section 128A, which is found at clause 36 of the bill. And it is about the matching of register information and information about the payment of teacher salaries at payrolled schools. Now this appears on the face of it to be simply a matter of sharing information between one government agency and another, and so it should. But one of the things that is particularly important and is stated as the purpose of the bill is to introduce information matching between the New Zealand Teachers Council and the Ministry of Education to identify individuals teaching in schools without registration. And this is something that the Labour Party absolutely supports. This has been worked through to the satisfaction of the Privacy Commissioner, as I understand it, and it is something where this kind of exchange of information is beneficial not only to the teacher, because to all intents and purposes the ultimate purpose of this is to ensure that they receive every payroll entitlement that they should. However, the better, and I think, well, yes, the more important perhaps consideration is that it's useful for principals and for those appointing teachers to be able to have the confidence to know who is still registered and who isn't. And I know my own experience in this area is somewhat out of date now, and I readily concede that, because in the time when I was a secondary school teacher, there was a huge shortage of teachers, and the human resources policy that was adopted at the time, we didn't even have HR in those days, there was no such thing. That tended to come later as an academic discipline and as a practice, but the human resources policy at that time could best be characterised as the warm body recruitment strategy. It didn't matter who was in front of the class as long as it was a warm body. And so there was a shortage of teachers, and being able to put any poor, unprepared person in front of a class of children was better than having nobody at all. But this goes further than this, and in fact becomes useful when teachers are deregistered and move away from that town, that city, and they may have been deregistered for nefarious reasons, they may have been deregistered for all sorts of serious misconduct. And those people should not be allowed to move around the country from school to school or city to city and pick up another teaching job. They should not be allowed to be in front of children in classrooms. And this allows that to be policed. That the sharing of the information, even for payroll purposes, ensures that principals and employing schools know for sure that the people they're employing are registered and therefore have met all the requirements of registration and are fit to teach children. Without that, and without some kind of matching of information, the possibility of deregistered teachers moving about the country and under the cloak of anonymity being able to take up another teaching job somewhere else far away, particularly when a teacher shortage might compel a principal to employ somebody and anybody, then the worst effects of that kind of possibility are mitigated, and hopefully better than mitigated, are avoided by this provision.
I call you